Oh, Kelly Lynn, that guy?
Hey there, welcome back to Who is Kelly Lynn? We're back after a break. Today we have Stephen Tyler Holman, the Honorable Councilman Stephen Tyler Holman from the city of Norman that is making his run for mayor coming up this February. He has been on the council for over 12 years, I do believe. Right at that. He's seen a lot of change in Norman. I call him Norman's nerd. He knows anything and everything about the legislative history, the architecture, everything about Norman, the businesses. He's really dedicated public servant. He is a guy that I vehemently disagree with on many political things, but I do like him. He's very authentic. I really enjoy this conversation. We go into some of the stuff, some of the trouble he got into here in Norman when he worked at a head shop. It's very interesting, the story about that. It was a long saga. It made many news stories about the councilman and him being charged with possession of drug paraphernalia from the place that he worked at. We talk about the defunding of the police after the George Floyd riot in 2020. Norman was one of 11 cities in the nation to defund their police, and he was one of the councilmen that made that vote. And he was the only one standing out of 8. We got rid out of 8 of the 9 of them or something like that, or 7 of the 8 of them after that vote. And that's when I became a councilman too, and that's how I came to know Councilman Holman. We sit down here today looking at what he has forward for the city of Norman. It's the third largest city in Oklahoma. It is a microcosm of America. It is politically divided just like America. This town is at each other's throat. They call it the Blue Oasis in Oklahoma because of the concentration of the Democrat votes in the city. But it's still almost equally divided, 40-40. Republican, Democrat, and about 20% independents. The national issues are on the stage here all the time, unfortunately, and it's a crazy place for the politics. I assure you that. And we have an interesting conversation while he's looking to become mayor. Hope you enjoy this conversation with Stephen Tyler Holman, Councilman Stephen Tyler Holman of the city of Norman, looking to become mayor of that same city. The Honorable Councilman Stephen Tyler Holman. How are you, brother?
Very good. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. Known you for a little bit here since we worked together.
A couple years ago.
A couple years ago.
We knew each other, yeah.
And that's why we're here today, because you're a councilman for the city of Norman, and now you're running to be the mayor of Norman.
That's right.
Tell me how that's going.
Going really great so far. It's definitely a grind, being out on the campaign trail every day. Coming off of a presidential election that was pretty contentious, and then the holiday season, and now it's freezing cold outside, and the election being on February 11th. So there's lots of forums, lots of events, lots of interviews and things to do. So it's exciting, but it definitely is. It takes a lot of energy, that's for sure.
Knocking lots of doors.
Yes, knocking doors in Ward 7 is quite different than. Knocking doors in a city that's almost 200 square miles,
It is a big difference, I have no doubt. Norman spread. It's one of the biggest cities ever.
It's in the top 50 largest cities in the United States in land area.
Area. It's crazy. You start from one side, from the west side, and you're driving, and it's like 17 miles or something to the other side.
I mean, as a comparison, Norman and Tulsa are about the same size in city limit area.
Really?
But Tulsa has 400,000 people, and we have 130. So
yeah, it's a big difference.
But it's a lot. It's a lot of different neighborhoods, as you know, rural areas, suburban neighborhoods, old historic neighborhoods, apartments. So a lot of different people live in Norman.
That's what I've always said since we moved here. We moved here in 2010 when I was going to law school. We just got married and just we're looking for a place to live, and just happened to get here because my wife she worked for veterinarians at the time as a vet tech, and we had just come up, went to OCU and checked it out, and were looking for or she was putting in applications at different places because we knew we were moving up here after making the decision of going to OCU. Tried to find a place to live. So when we moved up here after we got married, and happened to find one. It just happened to be in Norman, and I'm a conservative. I make no bones about that. My ideology and a traditionalist American and whatnot. And with that, I knew Norman, what it was. It was a little bit different, a little bit more liberal, but it was a great place for kids. I thought the schools were great at the time. They were highly ranked. And so we wound up in Norman. And honestly, I kept my head down here, rocked along, didn't even pay attention to politics or anything, didn't even know who my mayor or city councilman were because everything seemed all right until 2020 when the pandemic came in, and then it kind of broke crazy, and then there was the George Floyd incident and the defunding of the police. That's what made me throw my hat in the ring of politics, because I was like, hey man, am I going to stay in Norman? Am I going to fight here? I want to, with the pandemic and everything, it became where Norman seemed very much like a microcosm of America, and that's how I describe it to people. Politically, Norman is about as close as you're going to get as a reflection of America as a whole. Yeah. And believe me, the politics are on display constantly enough to wear you out. And that was one. It got me to come in there. Struck a little ire with the citizenry. And you participated in that, but that caused quite the uproar in the citizenry, and they kind of pushed back a little bit. Yeah. And
well, that's often what leads to most people deciding to get engaged or active in local government, for example, is it kind of does, you don't think about the day-to-day operations of the city or the mayor and city council until something happens that impacts you directly or that you care about, and then all of a sudden now you're very interested in who the mayor and council is and what decisions are they making. And so not uncommon for people to get engaged, originally that be part of the motivation. And for yourself, I know you could have, there's lots of other towns and cities in Oklahoma that are more conservative and fit your personal political views that you could have moved to, and everything would have been more geared towards the way you wanted. But you, like you said, you chose to live in Norman for various factors. And I think the fact, like you mentioned, politically the party affiliation in Norman is almost split about 40-40, and then 20% independents. 4 of the 8 city council wards have a majority Republican registration. 4 of them have a majority Democrat registration. And that doesn't necessarily line up with the council members who represent their ward's political party that they might be affiliated with, because I think people in Norman tend to vote for whoever they think is the best candidate, regardless of party affiliation.
If they vote.
Right. That's the problem. Thing. Yeah, and that's a thing with not just local, just nationally, more people, a higher percentage of people did not vote in the presidential election than voted for either of the candidates, Trump or Harris, so people across the country, people across the city of Norman, and the state of Oklahoma, I think, for the 3rd consecutive time, had the lowest voter turnout of all 50 states, percentage-wise. Wow. And was lower this year than 2020. And so, a lot of folks feel for whatever reason that they're a registered voter, but they don't feel compelled to go vote for anybody.
Well, I'll say it does depend on how the wind's blowing in politics. If everybody's doing all right and they just has their busy lives going along and nothing's really irking them, they're less likely to go vote. It's when the problems arise that they start turning their eye towards, hey, these elected officials are doing me wrong and we got to get rid of them, or we got to get this guy in here. They get excited to vote a lot of times just against somebody, not even for somebody. They're just like, we got to end that.
And you've seen, sitting on the dais at City Hall and city council meetings, the public doesn't necessarily come and pack City Hall very often when they're happy about something that they're, sometimes if the public is really in support of something. Norman Forward was an example of that, where we had a bunch of different groups, sports and libraries and parks people and everything, came to City Hall to tell us, we really support this idea. We want you guys to send it forward and let us decide. But for the most part on city council, when the city hall is packed full of people and we're there for multiple hours, it's because the public is upset about something. A neighborhood is opposed to a development. the budget issue, whatever it might be, it's generally because people are mad about something is why people get motivated to come to City Hall.
Well, if you
Or
become,
vote.
if you become mayor, how do you avoid that? Because I think a lot of times, it could just be as simple as saying, we're not taking up that issue. That's not an issue
Yeah.
for city council. But you get people, they're very passionate here in Norman
Yeah.
from both sides, and they will get up and they'll make phone calls and letters and emails, and they will show up when they want something from, I'll say the people that think like me are less likely to show up. Usually, I don't know. They're not. They'll sit at home and gripe about it, but they're less likely to go down there.
Yeah.
That's what I do appreciate about people that align more like you. There's a lot more passion, and that's why they get more stuff done, because they put the passion into it. They put time into it, and I don't. I would say it's usually a little disproportionate responses from when, but you saw them when they really had ire. They showed up, and that's
right.
My goal is, how do you avoid some of this? If you become mayor, how do you avoid some of the stuff like the defunding of the police that we're still feeling that feeling is still floating across Norman. While it's gone away some, and it's been reassembled and put back a little bit. Just the fact that even happened, how do you plan on avoiding those national issues, bringing them into Norman, and even making that a thing if you become mayor?
Sure. Well, we have an impassioned public here in Norman that is engaged and is not afraid to come down to City Hall and let us know what they think. And I think a lot of what's driven at City Hall is based off of public feedback, hearing from. Sometimes maybe it's the loudest group, but those people are taking the time and they care enough to come down and let us know. And we have things like the Turnpike and the Arena Entertainment District that have really united people, I would say, across the political spectrum.
I agree.
Whether it be because there's an existential threat to their property and their livelihood in regard to the OTA, and that's what I see a lot of times in local government is you have a neighborhood and you have Republicans and Democrats living on the same street, and there's an issue that's threatening their neighborhood. You often see them come together, or in this issue of the Turnpike, a lot of rural Normanites that are potentially very conservative, some of them more liberal or progressive perhaps, but coming together because both of them are being threatened by the same entity. And same thing with the Arena Entertainment District. We've seen that a lot of it's not just the professors at OU that were opposed to that. It's there are a lot of Republicans and conservative leaning folks that have expressed disapproval of that decision.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to mention there's two professors from OU that are very activists, that are husband and wife. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I'll tell you, I'm 1,180 degrees opposite of what they think in ideology. Generally 99.9% of the time. It's amazing that I am on board with this, looking at the same eyes that they're looking at this, and how some of the folks on council, it is literally a handful of people that want this to happen. And it's the money folks that want it to happen. It's OU and the chamber. And I don't want to disparage them because they can be good partners, but sometimes they just think, hey, we own this joint, let's shove this through, and this is what everybody wants. Progress, mm-hmm. Let's develop. Yeah. And if it was such a good idea, why don't they have their chamber members line up as investments and get in on this? Why are they trying to bilk the taxpayer? Why OU has billions of dollars? Why are they not spending their own money on an arena that is actually smaller than what they have right now? Going to the SEC, they tout all this SEC stuff. Are you planning on your attendance to basketball games being cut by a third going into the SEC? So you're going to build a smaller arena that's a third smaller, from 12,000 or whatever, I think 12,000 something seats down to 8,000 something seats.
Yeah.
But you can't tell me that makes sense. You can't build up this SEC. We need all this SEC stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we're like, it's going to be so much. We're going to cut a third of this stadium because the draw is going to be so small. But it'll make it look like we have a full arena. That's got to be the smallest arena in all of the SEC.
Yeah, it would be. It would be the only arena not on the university campus in the SEC. Also, I actually kind of like the idea of a smaller arena because I felt that Lloyd Noble Center was too big, and that they've always struggled to fill it, even when they're good.
Improve
Sometimes,
the team.
right? It's always been a challenge, and it's not in a great location in the where it's at. I personally would like to see an on-campus arena. My suggestion to OU and what I've been throwing out there in the community has been to try to build a new track and field somewhere down by Lloyd Noble Center, and then you could build a brand new arena right next door to the football stadium, right in the middle of campus, and just a few blocks from Campus Corner and Main Street. And everybody that I've mentioned that to has really thought that was a great idea and a great opportunity to have an on-campus arena, and that would get people excited and would help support the businesses we already have on Campus Corner and Main Street. And being in the middle of campus, it really appeals to the students more so than an arena that's several miles from campus. But I mean, my thoughts on it have been exactly that, about if it is such a great slam dunk deal, if you will, for Norman, then shouldn't there be private investment lined up to cover the cost of it? Or if they want this amount of public commitment, 100% of sales and property tax for 25 years, then up to $600 million, I think the public should vote on that directly. And that's the feedback that I've overwhelmingly heard for the last year and a half, has been, we're not necessarily opposed to an arena or even it being up there if that's what they want to do, but if you want public money to that amount, then the public needs to vote on that directly. And I agree with that.
And haven't they done that? Hasn't this been voted on in the past or something similar?
This has never made it to a vote of the people. There was a plan that came forward in 2018 for a potential arena entertainment district up there in the University North Park. But after it was clear there weren't going to be enough votes on council to move it forward, the applicants withdrew the plan, and it never came back up until this past year in 2020, fall of 2023, when they officially announced it was coming, a new plan was coming forward. So no, it's never been voted on by the people yet, but it's just, there's been versions of it that have been touted about, I guess, in the community.
Well, with that, also, and you mentioned the turnpike, that's a big issue too. Where does that stand right now? What's going on? So
in August, the council, we unanimously rejected a resolution of cooperation. OTA was asking the city of Norman to basically, we're getting close to finishing design of the east-west connector, the piece of the turnpike that would connect Newcastle across the north side of Norman and then up to the I-40, where the Kickapoo Turnpike currently ends. That they were doing the final designs, and that if we wanted frontage roads or additional interchanges, or a multimodal path or whatever else, then we needed to ask for it in writing from them, and the council needed to pass a resolution asking for it. And we looked at a couple different versions of a resolution. Councilmember Nash put together his own version, and I came prepared to potentially vote on something, because the proposal basically was the east-west connector is happening no matter what. That's what we're being told. That litigation has played out. The Supreme Court of the state has ruled, and we're being told this is happening, so you might as well get what you can out of it. And we had a city public meeting in August. The chamber was packed full of people, and we sat there and listened to testimony for 5-6 hours. And every single person that got up and spoke against us passing a resolution of any kind of cooperation with OTA. And they viewed it as, if you ask them, first of all, if we ask them for frontage roads, then the city of Norman also would be committing to take over maintenance of those frontage roads forever. Miles of new paved roads. It's already a challenge to maintain what we already have, so we're going to take on the maintenance of several miles of new frontage roads, and the addition of frontage roads and interchanges meant more property that would be taken from potential property owners that do not want to sell. And so those factors, along with overwhelming public opposition, the council voted unanimously to reject that resolution. And then it almost came back up in October. I guess some folks were surprised that we rejected that resolution, and they tried to get us to reconsider for the fact that, well, it's going to happen anyway. We need to get these frontage roads so we can have, more intense development along both sides of it. And that's a whole nother issue, of course. And we postponed making a decision to invite OTA to come to Norman and do a town hall. And they then the next day responded that they were not going to come to Norman and meet with us. They were not going to meet with our residents, and they were just going to move ahead with their design and plans without us. So that's the current state of it. And then the north-south section of the proposed turnpike, their initial route was rejected by the federal government, and so they are at the drawing board right now trying to come up with alternative routes to either move it further west at like between 60th and 72nd or 48th and 60th, or the potential of it moving on the other side of the lake, as Senator Standridge has, I guess, proposing to do. But I also just saw last night the governor of the absentee Shawnee tribe has said they do not want it coming on that, and they're through their land on the east side of the lake either. So,
but they're determined, to make this.
The OTA seems determined to put this through Norman, even if the city doesn't want it, if our residents seemingly are overwhelmingly opposed. And it's not just a few people, it's a lot of people. And when we have multiple meetings at City Hall that are packed full of people who one after the other for hour on hour get up and tell us no, who am I representing as a city council member? Am I representing business interest, or am I representing the people of Norman? And
it can be both.
Yeah, it can be both.
It can be both.
It can be both. And it is both, but in this case, it's like the residents are telling us no.
Yeah.
So who am I voting for if I vote for this?
Yeah.
So it's still uncertain.
With the way they did it, I'm just saying, if it's happening, you're kind of exchanging off that all that will go completely around Norman. What about the economic impact of all that traffic flowing around Norman?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I haven't been in support of the plan is because we don't need traffic to be rerouted around Norman. We need traffic on I-35 to stop and get off at Lindsay Street and Main Street and Robinson or Tecumseh and go fill up with gas in Norman and get something to eat in Norman or shop in Norman. And rerouting traffic around Norman is not beneficial to us that I can see, unless you say, okay, well, now we're just going to open up all of Norman to develop strip malls and fast food restaurants all the way to every edge of town, which the people that live in rural Norman do not support that. And the lake is an impaired body of water. That's a whole nother thing. Removing thousands of trees, displacing wildlife, and then plopping down a multiple lane concrete highway along the little river that's the main tributary to the lake. I just don't see how and then placing another one right next to the lake that goes north and south. I don't see how that possibly could help improve the situation with Lake Thunderbird being a impaired body of water. So the rural character of Norman, the taking of private property rights, the harm to Lake Thunderbird and wildlife and the natural character of that area just doesn't seem like that's worth the cost of having some more strip malls and McDonald's drive-thrus,
I believe that too, but I just don't get what that organization, they just don't care. We're doing what we do, push through. I definitely think that
The state could stop it. The governor, in my opinion, could stop it. He's come out really recently, really against the use of eminent domain for that energy corridor, and so a lot of OTA, opponents that live in Norman are like, "Hey, well, what about us? Is it okay for eminent domain if it's OTA or the state taking our property,
Yeah.
just not the federal government?"
it's not the federal government.
Yeah, and so, but people feel like, hey, we're facing a similar situation. Our properties are being taken, and it's just like where are people going to move to? You're not going to be able to get the same value for the property you have.
Oh no, especially those people that've been out there forever.
Exactly.
They have acreage of land. Some of them, their home's been in the land for 50, even longer than that. 100. Somebody at one of those meetings was like, "This has been in our family for 100-something years."
Yeah, since before statehood. In
Yeah.
some cases, before they were even in the city of Norman.
Going to put an interstate through it.
Yeah, I really question what traffic is going to be rerouted around it, because I don't believe that it will relieve traffic on I-35, because it will be too far to the east for it to be convenient to get from Norman to OKC. People aren't going to use it that live in most of Norman right now. And if it connects down by Purcell at I-35, truck traffic coming from the south, coming from Dallas, they could take Highway 75 directly to Tulsa if that's what they're doing. But if they come all the way north to Purcell, they're coming into the metro area. They're going to have a load that's going into the city. So are they going to go several miles out to Highway 9, or, not Highway 9, I guess there'll be a leg that connects to I-35. But are they going to go several miles around just to come back in? I don't think so. And Austin, Texas, there's a similar toll road that was built around Austin to try to relieve traffic on I-35. And people do use it. I've been on it. I went to Corpus Christi a few months ago, and we drove on it.
But not for the expense. It
was 85 mile an hour speed limit, and there was very few cars on it. And when we came back, we went through I-35 through Austin, because I just want to drive through Austin, and it was bumper to bumper. It was still packed, even with this new toll road out to the side, and but partly because it went so far out to come back in. If you're going from Waco to San Antonio, it was not really that convenient or a time saver to take that alternative. So anyway,
and that's what's been said about like the other turnpikes here. Sure, you can get on them,
yeah,
but it doesn't seem like it's. Maybe we're looking far into the future. I get that.
Yeah,
but like right now, how much money did y'all spend on this? How many cars are using it? Is it even making its toll?
Well, it's gone from $5 billion plan. That's a statewide plan, but $5 billion to $8.5 billion. And they just increased the tolls on January 1st. I forget the percent, but it was a lot. A lot. I mean, it's like $11 without a pike pass to drive to Tulsa and back now if you want to take the Turner.
It's insane.
And, on the north side of OKC, the few proponents of the Turnpike in Norman, their argument is that Indian Hill Road in Norman could look like up there where the Kilpatrick Turnpike is by Quail Springs Mall, and we could have, that's what North Norman could look like, and that's what they view as progress for Norman, is a lot of strip malls and drive-thrus and stuff along the north side of Norman there along Indian Hill Road. And but I can tell you, anytime I ever go up there, I don't take the Turnpike to get to it. You can get there through all the city streets like Western and Penn and Memorial. I would never pay a toll to drive up to that area when I can take a city street for free. And so I do like I think a lot of folks like the idea of a connection between Newcastle and Norman, Indian Hill Road. There's a bridge connecting Newcastle and it lining up over there. And that's been talked about before, like a boulevard type of thing. And we have voter-approved projects, 2 of them, or it's one that would widen Indian Hill Road from I-35 to 48th. And so it's part of the 2019 voter-approved street enhancement bond package. And so what happens with that with the Turnpike? We're still some uncertainty with that. If OTA was going to be willing to widen 36th Avenue for us or not. That was one of the things they wanted us to ask them for, and whether they would do it or not was not guaranteed. So there's a lot to it for sure, but it's just, if the Norman public, I would still personally not feel good about it, but if the Norman public was overwhelmingly in favor of this happening as an elected official, that would change my official position on it and how I would vote. If I felt that the public was overwhelming, if the people impacted by the turnpike were like, oh yeah, we're happy to for this to come through and we're selling and doing it willingly and happily, that would be different. But that's not the feedback that we've heard from the public.
How much is your paycheck each month?
$100 before taxes.
Earn every penny, don't you?
Yeah, make a $600 million decision. Make a 100-year decision on the turnpike stuff. Try to solve homelessness. Try to represent every person as best as possible. But yeah, for $100 a month, and I think that's why you see such a high turnover rate on the council. I've mentioned many times that I've now served with 4 different mayors and almost 40 different council members in the last 12 years. And there's one ward that has had a new council member every single election. And 2-1, the majority of my former colleagues didn't lose re-election. They chose to not run again for whatever reason. They served 1 or 2 terms, and then the average, I added it up recently, it was 1.4 was the average term served since I've been on council, and I'm in my 6th term. And so people aren't even serving a full 2 terms on average for various reasons. And yeah, for $100 a month, you've got a family, you've got a business to run, and people are tagging you on social media. People are sharing their grief with you at council meetings.
I will say,
it's hard to take.
And not just to those out here, I'll just tell you the sacrifice. I mean, besides me getting beat up on all the time in the media and whatnot, I sacrificed about $200,000 to do that job for 2 years because of work that I just didn't take on.
Yeah.
Because it was a lot. There was a lot going on, and believe me, it would just it'd suck your soul sometimes.
Well,
Some of it, man.
Being elected at 28 years old and now just recently turning 40, I mean, I've dedicated almost a third of my lifetime to being a city council member in Norman, and I've definitely sacrificed, like, I feel like I could be more financially well off and stable. I could have, be a homeowner. I feel like relationships have been sacrificed because of the amount of time I dedicate to being a city council member and trying to be a good representative. And it's hard on your family. It's hard on people that care about you. And it does come with a sacrifice of time and opportunity that you are giving up because you are committed to this thing. It's, you give up on things. And so I feel like I could probably be more wealthier. I could be more well off in general at this point in my life if I hadn't dedicated so much time to being a city council member. But Norman's my hometown, and that's the reason why I always tell people why have you done it so long, Stephen? Why do you want to be mayor and keep doing this? And Norman's my hometown. I've always loved Norman, and I feel a real sense of privilege to be in the position to make decisions like these on behalf of our residents. And it feels really good to be a part of, growing up here, riding the city bus or going to Westwood Pool in the summers, and then being a part of hopefully improving those services for current and future residents, or building a brand new Westwood Pool and having the plaque at the front entrance have your name on it. And as a kid growing up here, that's very rewarding to me, and that's a lot of reason why when it gets really difficult, I think about, well, I'm lucky to be in this position and be able to have this impact on my hometown like this and leave a lasting impression that's hopefully positive.
Well, we had this conversation the other day. Like I told you, anytime anybody's asked me about you because of my connection with you, working with you, I just be honest. I tell them there's not a whole lot that we agree on, politically.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you that authenticity and sincerity is somebody that really He's doing what he does because he loves it. I've never known you're nerdy about it. You are a nerd about Norman.
Yeah, that's
you are
true.
a nerd about Norman. you know legislative stuff. You know history stuff. You know architecture stuff. You are a nerd. That's the only way I'll say it. You nerd out on Norman, which I mean, you haven't got the most love all the time on council. Some people, I'm sure are pretty big fans of you, but then you had a lot of ire.
Well, after 12 years, it's inevitable that I have voted for or against something that people wanted me to do the opposite of, and you're bound to make almost everyone upset at some point if you do it that long.
That's what I was going to get to. For you, a little humility. What are some of the mistakes that you've made voting, some of the projects, anything like that? Point out some of the ones that you say, yeah, I got that one wrong.
Yeah. I mean, in 12 years, there's development projects I have approved before that did not turn out the way that they were presented to us and the way I expected. And then you drive by it every day and you look at it and they're like, I can't believe I voted for that thing. And being in positions where it's not necessarily regret, but there's not always a good, like, we get to vote yes or no. That's the options on the dais. And not always is a yes or no vote good. Sometimes they're both bad. And like the issue with the OU motel right now, those residents are going to be evicted on February 1st. And I'm very concerned about where they're going to go. Many of them are probably going to end up homeless. And 2 years ago, we were faced with a rezoning proposal from the property owner to change it from commercial to residential. If we said no, they were going to redevelop it as a commercial strip mall, basically. And if we said yes, they were going to build an apartment building with 600 bedrooms, which would add 600 more bedrooms to our housing stock. And theoretically, supply and demand, if you had more, you could bring down prices, rent prices. And I voted for the rezoning because I felt like that was a better option than a commercial strip mall. But that decision is having a real impact on people who are living there, and they're living there because it's the only place they'll rent to them for whatever reason. They're there for a reason. And things like that really weigh on me heavily personally. And there are other things. I mean, like we mentioned, the budget meeting. I wish that meeting it had been gone about in a much different way instead of everyone in one meeting clashing, the public clashing, and council being there, for hours and hours and hours. Tensions running high. That could have been handled a lot differently. And at the time, what we decided, I thought was a good compromise on. We had a lot of people expressing frustration and issues with the Norman Police Department, or how much money that we're allocating to them every year, which is the most of all the city departments by far. And it has been every year I've been on council, and going back more than 20 years. It's the biggest expenditure for the city. And then you had people coming out and saying, I've got concerns about safety and crime. I've never experienced a negative interaction with the police, and I don't think we should, I think we should give them whatever budget increase they're asking for. And after Councilmember Scott proposed the $4.5 million cut to the police budget, that's what we had the whole debate about, and everybody got to air their grievances and share their stories and opinions why we should or shouldn't. And then that amendment failed 8-1. She was the only one that voted for it. And then 3 other amendments were proposed to still give them a slight increase, but not the $1 million increase they had requested, and try to address things like crisis response, which to me was an attempt to help decrease the burden on the police department to be the only entity dealing with this thing. And then, an internal auditor position, which voters did approve in 2022, and which we have now. But I thought it was, at the time, a good compromise. We're not defunding the police, as in we're not reducing their budget, we're not cutting their budget, but we're going to take some of this proposed $1 million increase and address some of these issues. So at the time, it seemed like a good compromise, but in the end, everybody kind of left feeling disappointed and upset. People that wanted us to actually do a budget cut those that didn't want us to cut anything. So it created a lot of hard feelings. It created, recall attempts and got people motivated to run for council like yourself, and is now, still this constant issue that we have to discuss in Norman. And even though this past year we approved a $42 million budget for the police department, it was unanimous, and it was the largest ever in their department history. So, I mean, they're still the largest funded department in the city by far, and they're the only department really that gets a budget increase every single year. All the departments ask for more funding and staff every year.
Give me some inside baseball during that time when all the recalls and stuff were happening. You were the last man standing from all that. You're the only one that survived the whole thing.
Yeah, I've been reelected twice since then. I was reelected in 2021. And then I was reelected again in 2023. I even ran unopposed, surprisingly enough. I think part of that is I think I've done a pretty good job representing my ward and listening to the feedback I receive. I have voted for things before where, an example is like, something I personally did not think was a good idea, but the neighborhood or the feedback I was hearing from residents of Ward 7 was that we do support this, and so I voted for it. The Sage at Cobblestone is an example of that. Did not think it was a good location for a independent living facility in my ward, but the neighborhood that was around it, the majority of feedback I was hearing was that they did support it, and so I voted for it even though I didn't personally think it was a good idea. And then same thing, I've voted against things before that I thought were probably a good idea, but the feedback we were hearing was not in favor of that. And so that's part of what I like to do, and try to listen the best I can on those issues. I like to think it's part of that, but I also think it's that people look at what happens at city council, and a lot of regular everyday people don't feel compelled to be like, well, I don't agree with Stephen all the time, but I don't necessarily want to sit in that chair either.
Yeah.
So
I promise you, it's how you've done it this long. It blows my mind because it's a lot.
I never would have thought I would. I really didn't. I ran when I was 26 in 2011. I lost by 21 votes in a runoff without having any money. I had no idea what I was doing, and I almost won. So I was kind of like, oh wow, if I stay involved, stay engaged with city issues, if I get a little more organized and run again, I might be able to win. And so I did that, and I ran, and I won by 28 votes in 2013, and then ran unopposed in 2015, and was reelected in 2017. Right when I was in the middle of the friendly market legal ordeal. I actually was still under indictment.
Throw that out here real quick. Just highlight that story. Because that's where your name first came, where I knew who you were because you made the news. As mentioned, City Council only pays $100 a month, so we all have regular jobs or we're retired. And so in fall of 2015, I started working for a locally owned small business in Norman called Friendly Market. And what kind of products did they sell, Steve?
Glass pipes, smoking accessories, furniture, jewelry, all sorts of stuff.
And they were for tobacco at that time, correct?
They were for any illegal use, basically. Basically, we sold the product, and our view and what the law says is what people decide to do with that product after they now own that product and take it home is not, our responsibility as a business. We did not promote any illegal use for them, and under state law, we didn't have posters of pot leaves and Bob Marley and
no
joints. Right. So we weren't promoting illegal activity, and under the state law, that's how it was defined as we could not promote illegal activity or use.
Headshot for...
Yeah. And so we didn't try to make any claims about... tobacco is definitely like people can, and some do, use them for that purpose. So... and that actually played a major role in our trial, was... what could they be used for? And we did have an expert testify that one, glass pipes were the cleanest and safest device to smoke any substance out of, because unlike wood and metal, when they burn, they don't off-gas any harmful chemicals, and a wooden pipe can develop mold inside of the pores of the wood when they're get wet and things like that. So he testified for us actually about how glass pipes are the cleanest, safest thing, and how there's all these wider range of legal smokable herbs that you could smoke. And this is before medical marijuana became legal in Oklahoma. But I had worked there for less than 3 months, and on December 1st, 2015, the police department conducted a raid of Friendly Market, a store with about we had 3 employees, and I think we made about $350, $400 a day maybe in sales. So a real big enterprise here. They had spent multiple weeks parked across the street at the 7-Eleven parking lot taking pictures of everybody that went in and out of the store. They came in, they opened up the cash register, they took all the money out of it, took the bank deposits, confiscated all those as being illegal proceeds from the sale of drug paraphernalia. And the next day, our attorneys said, well, go ahead and restock and keep things going as usual, and we'll navigate whatever comes. So we did. We restocked, and the transcript did a thing. It was like Friendly Market restocks and reopens.
Little free advertising.
On December 10th, though, charges were Friday, December 10th, charges were filed, or it was maybe a Thursday night. Charges were filed against the owner of the store, Robert Cox, and myself as the general manager of the store for possession of 13 charges, 12 each for possession of drug paraphernalia, misdemeanor, and then 1 felony each for the money in the store.
Hey, that's some. If you ever want to start a rap career, that's a pretty good street cred, buddy.
Yeah. So you can imagine when I was charged with those 13 charges, council member charged with drug felony was on the front page of not just the transcript, but the Oklahoman and even some national papers, which ended up working out.
How's that feel? Been there a couple times.
Yeah. It generated a lot of attention, a lot of real positive public feedback. Everybody, it was just kind of overwhelmingly, people were like, what? Who cares about what glass pipes, and why is the Norman police dedicating so much resources and time and effort to something like that?
Do you think they feel silly now?
There was
maybe even not at the time, but now
even during that,
feel silly.
At the time, there were even officers in the department that I had heard from that were like, we don't think this makes our department look good. This is a waste of time. But people were like, okay, Norman's a college town. It's the 3rd largest city in the state. It's known for being more liberal, maybe. And
maybe. There's no maybe about
and
it.
And that it's no secret that people
it's
in
the
a college...
blue,
right.
what do they call it? The blue oasis.
Blue oasis. Yeah. But it's not like nobody would be surprised to learn that people do smoke marijuana in Norman, Oklahoma, right?
Look at Oklahoma, it overwhelmingly
exactly
marijuana. Everybody's like, hell yeah.
Well, and State Question 788 passed in Norman by over 70%. It passed.
Think. Most of that are your regular voters that are going to vote on that.
Yeah.
And they tried to hustle up people to vote against it, and they didn't do very good.
Yeah,
that's conservatives voting for that.
Well, and I added up the percent approval in each ward, actually, and the lowest percent that it passed by in Norman was 64% in Ward 5.
Really?
And Ward 7 was 83%, and Ward 4 was 88%. And so Norman as a whole did overwhelmingly support State Question 788 medical marijuana. So that's why during our case, people were like, what is this? Like, aren't there bigger issues for the police department to be dealing with in Norman over this? And, that made national headlines. On December 20th, the police came back and raided the store again. After the transcript published a Friendly Market restocks and reopens article. So they came back. I wasn't there this time, so I was there the first time when they came in. And it wasn't like anything you see in the movies. It was like an unmarked white van, no uniformed officers or marked patrol cars. They just came in with their jeans and T-shirt and their badge around their neck, and no guns drawn, no yelling and screaming. They just came in and said, "Hello, Norman Police, we have a warrant to search the premises." And they asked me a couple questions, and then they said, "Okay, well, if you want to leave, we're going to be in here for a couple hours, so we can give you guys a call whenever we're done, and you can come back." And so I called the owner and was like, "Hey, we're being raided," and he came down there, and they were like, "Yeah, we're not going to let you in, sir." And he's like, "You're not going to let me own my own business?" And they were like, "Nope, we're doing an official, we have a warrant. We're going to look through everything. We're going to take anything that we deem as drug paraphernalia." And so the headlines generated a lot of attention, and the second raid, people like came down there with posters and were on the news like protesting, and people were taking pictures of the undercover officers like taking stuff out, and they were trying to hide their faces, and it was just a whole kind of a circus. And after that, we decided not to restock, and we did stay open for another 6 months or so, just selling the furniture and other stuff. The community was very supportive. But once we realized that the legal case was going to go on for a while, we closed the store, put everything in storage with the idea that we're going to win this and we're going to reopen this store. And so we pled not guilty to all the charges. Because of the second raid, there were additional charges added to Robert, the owner. And then within 48 hours of us rejecting a plea deal, 2 of our clerks were charged with 1 count each of possession of drug paraphernalia.
Really?
Yeah, a misdemeanor, of course. And it seemed convenient that after a few months had gone by, within 48 hours of us saying no to a plea deal,
ratchet up that
there's
pressure.
Additional charges made. And
a little more pressure on these guys.
Yeah, so we had a really great law firm, Wagner and Lynch, out of McAllister. Two just regular guys. They drive pickup trucks. They don't wear real nice suits or anything, and they are very different politically. I'll just say that. Different personalities for sure, Blake Lynch and Brecken Wagner. But they were really great defense attorneys, and one of the things they really told us was, if you're wanting a deal, getting an attorney that's good friends with the district attorney and plays golf with them, or their kids go to school together, that might be beneficial to you. But if you're wanting to go to trial and be found not guilty and get your property back and reopen that store, then we're the lawyers you're going to need, because we will do whatever it takes to win this. Like, we are, we're not here to make friends with anybody. We're not here to play nice, and we don't care if anybody in Norman likes us or not, especially the police or the DA's office. So, but they were really good, and we went through 3 criminal trials in front of juries, 0 convictions. The owner and I.
Why 3?
The 2 clerks went on trial for a misdemeanor charge where they could have taken a 6 months or a year probation. They both decided, Max Walters and Cody Franklin decided they believed that this was ridiculous. They did not believe they did anything wrong, and they wanted Friendly Market to reopen. So they refused plea deals. They requested a jury trial, each of them, for a misdemeanor charge. We were told that almost never happens. And so there was a six-member jury. The first trial for Max was a 3-day trial. I want to say 6 law enforcement officials testified against him. We presented no witnesses and only like 1 piece of evidence, and it was a hung jury, and it was declared a mistrial. I spoke with the jury foreman for over an hour after, and it was a 5-1,
Really?
Not guilty. Yeah. And there's one of them wouldn't change. So the next day, the DA says, "Well, nothing's changed. We're going to retry Max Walters at a later date." And then a few months go by. That was in October 2016. February 2017, Cody Franklin goes on trial, facing 1 count, misdemeanor possession of drug paraphernalia. Same case was presented by the prosecution, same witnesses, and the jury deliberated for 30 minutes and found Cody not guilty.
Nice.
The jury foreman afterwards, I talked to him in the parking lot for like an hour, and he was like, "There's got to be more to this story, right? Like, It was just like there's no drugs involved at all. It was just glass pipes and the money. And he was like, there had to be more. And I was like, that's it. That's the whole thing. And he was just astonished by it. So they found Cody not guilty on February 3rd, 2017. I was then reelected 2 weeks later to city council by 79% of the vote. A student ran against me, and they had only lived in Norman for a few months. But I was nervous. I had 13 pending charges against me, one of which was a felony. I hadn't gone to trial yet. And although the public was so overwhelmingly in our favor, I didn't know what voters of Ward 7 were going to think about voting for me again, because if I were found guilty of that felony, I would have had to resign. And then the council would have appointed somebody to replace me, and Ward 7 would have not had representation potentially of someone they support. And so I didn't know what voters would think, and I ended up winning by almost 80%. Low turnout, of course, but I won. And then the next week I was voted best elected official by the Norman Transcript Reader's Choice Awards. And so we thought, okay, there's been 2 trials. I've just been reelected. Surely the DA's office is going to drop this whole thing. This is ridiculous, basically. And the public doesn't support this, obviously. But in May 2017, the owner and I went on trial together, sitting next to each other, started on Monday morning and ended the following Monday night. 15 people testified against us, the chief of police, 2 city attorneys. I shouldn't say testified against us, but testified for the prosecution. One of the city attorney's testimonies actually really helped us. So in that case, because it kind of contradicted the testimony of the other city attorney. And so who told me there was no problem taking the job when I asked. And then once charges were filed, was like, oh, no, I told Stephen not to take that job, that he shouldn't do it. Oh. And I was like, oh, okay, so I'm just going to ask you for your advice. And then
that reminds me.
Yeah.
There's one time I asked the city attorney and the city manager about taking my job as a judge. He said, yeah, no problem, until I became a judge.
Well, I learned to always get it in writing.
And I have that in writing.
Because I met with that city attorney, that previous city attorney at a restaurant and asked him and didn't get in writing. I was naive. But anyway, we had a bunch of people testify against us in front of a jury of 12. We put up one witness, this guy that was an expert in smoking devices and smokable herbs, basically. He had written books about it. He travels the world teaching classes about that type of stuff. And so we were able to get him to come in and talk about why glass pipes, basically. And one of our attorneys, he asked the question of the police, because the state law on drug paraphernalia was like 12 steps that you apply to an item to determine if it's drug paraphernalia. But the case the police and the DA were making was there is no 12-step process. It's drug paraphernalia because we know what it's going to be used for. And that's not what the state law said. And our attorney even asked, in the trial, he said, so if I asked one of the detectives on the witness stand, so if I take this pipe, this bong here, and I walk 50 feet out the front door of the courthouse, and I put tobacco in it, and I start smoking it, what are you going to do? And the detective said, well, I'm going to stop, I'm going to investigate, and I'm going to cite you for possession of drug paraphernalia, because it doesn't matter what you put in the pipe. The pipe itself is illegal to exist. That is not the law, and that's what we discovered through the process. And we ended up being found not guilty after a 5-hour deliberation, but they were deliberating on 26 combined charges and coming to a unanimous decision on each one of them. And so I was never nervous until we were marched up to the 4th floor of the courthouse, and our attorneys took us aside and said, look, here's what's going to happen. We feel great about how it's gone. We feel very confident. But if you are found guilty, you're going to be taken into custody immediately. And we'll appeal, but you're going to be there for a while. And so, give your phone and keys and wallet and everything to your family and tell everybody goodbye, basically, for now.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah.
Sweating it all during that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's when I started to feel nervous.
Shake of the leg or anything.
Yeah, and when we went into the courtroom, half the courtroom was full of police officers, and the lead detective, Rick Newell, his wife and kid were there, and I had said some things about him on social media about how I basically didn't think you should be a detective in Norman, and in the heat of the moment, and so they came there to support their people, and I went. Judge Schumacher did my charges first, and she started reading. I thought we would be found guilty of maybe one of the misdemeanors. That the jury would be like, "Well, the police went through all this effort, and the district attorney put on this whole thing, and so we'll probably get them with one of these." And so I was nervous about that. I didn't think we would be convicted of the felony, again, because there were no drugs actually there or involved in the case. The Judge Schumacher read not guilty 13 times. For me, and then read not guilty 13 more times for the owner, Robert Cox, and he and I walked out of that courtroom to a crowd full of people outside the courthouse that were cheering, and the news was there. And
pretty good feeling, huh?
Yeah, it felt very
after all that nonsense,
vindicating. But it was so much to have to go through, and but it didn't end there. The next month, the DA said the next day, the DA said he was going to proceed with retrying Max Walters for that first trial, and was going to try Robert Cox for 2 other charges that were pending against him for that second raid. And so we were like, oh my, really? Like, what? And that really just set some more people off, really. And then in June, Ryan Kiesel, he was the current head of the Oklahoma ACLU, he was a former state representative who was part of the legislature that updated the current drug paraphernalia statute, the 12-step thing. So he was very familiar with it. He initiated a email campaign to the DA's office. Basically, click here and it sends it automatically. And he got so overwhelmed that we think that that following Monday in June, he announced that he was dropping all the remaining charges against Max and Robert, and was returning all the money that the police had taken in the 2 raids from the register and the bank proceeds, but was not going to give back the property that they had taken, that it was still drug paraphernalia. We were found not guilty of possessing it, but it is still drug paraphernalia, and they're not going to give it back. They're going to use a forfeiture procedure, civil asset forfeiture, to take it. And we were like, we just had 3 criminal. So we went and had a hearing in front of Judge Stice at Cleveland County, and he basically said that there's 1,000 pieces of evidence right here. There's a 12-step process to determine if they're drug paraphernalia. We're not going to go through that whole thing for each one of these things. There were 3 criminal trials. There were 0 convictions. And the law says that when in doubt, err on the side, that was his interpretation, err on the side of returning property to the rightful owner. And there was no dispute who the rightful owner was, Mr. Robert Cox. So Judge Stice ordered them to return all of our property. And they then appealed that ruling to the state Supreme Court. And so we had to go up there. So like 6 months after we've gone through the criminal stuff, we're still in court. Attorneys are still being paid. Thankfully, a nonprofit organization out of Washington, D.C. read about our case, and they ended up covering the fees for the defense, partly, in large part, because it was a civil asset forfeiture case, and that was one of their main things. And so, and it really slippery slope for the government to say something's illegal because we know what it's going to be used for. That can be interpreted a lot of different ways. We had a lot of gun rights activists, for example, express support for us because it was like,
we know what it's going to be used for.
Or there's only one purpose for this, and it's for marijuana. So that was another thing. But yeah, we went to the Supreme Court of Oklahoma, and in September 2017, the Supreme Court unanimously upheld Judge Stice's ruling and ordered them to return all of our property. So we went to the Norman Investigation Center with our attorneys and loaded up their truck and full of boxes. We signed a lease on a new storefront downtown Norman on Porter, and reopened Friendly Market in October 2017 after being closed for a year and a half. And then 8 months later, medical marijuana became legal in Oklahoma. And then so we added that component, and then now Friendly Market's been around for 10 years as a locally owned small business. And So yeah, that's a sort of a summary of that whole thing.
Good fun times in life, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I think you should probably take the time and probably, if you wrote down all the details of that story, you'd probably have a pretty good book.
I've thought about that. I've given so many interviews about it. One time this reporter interviewed me about it, and she started with a blank yellow notebook and filled the entire thing. I mean, I talked to her for almost 5 hours.
Wow.
And I just went into detail about every step of what happened from the beginning. How I ended up working at Friendly Market was Robert Cox, the owner, had opened his business in October 2014 in Ward 7. And had consulted with multiple attorneys about what could he do, what was illegal, what was actually illegal, because there was this, Norman was known for like head shops getting harassed or shut down in Norman. But there's head shops and pipe stores all over Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and even in a bunch of small towns that are not liberal. And in Okmulgee, there was one right next to the police station there, and I was like, Okmulgee's not like some liberal town, and so he had been open, and then another store had been raided and shut down, and he had been visited by a detective who basically told him, if you pack up your stuff and stop selling this stuff, then you won't hear from us. But if you don't, then you will. And so Robert then contacted me and said, Stephen, I own a small business in your city council ward. I think you might know my daughter, Elise, from Norman High. And would you be willing to come meet with me? I'm really concerned about, what's going on and what I'm being told about my business. And so I went and met with him, and I was able to arrange for a meeting between him and the chief of police and some detectives. And it didn't really go anywhere. They were pretty adamant that, well, we know what glass pipes are for. They're for marijuana. Marijuana's a gateway drug, and we're not going to budge on that. And if you keep selling it, we're going to come and, there's going to be trouble, basically. And so at that point, I told Robert, I said, as a council member, that's pretty much the extent of how much I can get involved in this situation. I can't make the police change their opinion about this. So I advise you to probably look into hiring legal counsel if you feel like that. So he stopped selling glass pipes that whole summer. Business declined, and by that fall, he was definitely facing closing the store. And I came across this case out of McAllister, a store called the Funky Monkey, and these two attorneys that were representing them, and they had been raided for suspicion of selling it wasn't just drug paraphernalia. They were being accused of selling K2, if you remember, the synthetic marijuana stuff. They were raided. There was not any of that substance, but the police were going to keep all their property that they had taken.
Regardless?
Yeah. And they had seized money in a bank account, like a business account, several thousands of dollars. And so these attorneys, though, the story was about how they had, without even going to trial, or were able to get all their property back and get the police to leave them alone, and they were back in business. And they sold pipes and piercings and tattoos and adult toys, and they were like the whole gambit. And at Friendly Market was nothing like that. But I had sent that to Robert, the owner of Friendly Market, said, hey, check out these two attorneys, check out this case in McAllister. There's some similarities. And then there was another one in Oklahoma City with Ziggy's. Ziggy's is a chain of stores that have been around since the 80s in Oklahoma City that sell pipes and other stuff. And the previous owner had been raided and arrested for selling synthetic marijuana and had gone to prison. And this new guy bought the business. Well, then he started getting harassed about basically what the previous owner had done and threatened, like, we're going to seize your property. We're going to, even landowners being threatened, if you continue to lease your property out to this criminal enterprise, we're going to take your whole building. And so he lost some of his stores that he had bought. And so he had success in a federal court, Judge Joe Heaton, about basically the police were told you can't continue to harass this business owner for whatever the previous guy did. And so I sent that to Robert and said, hey, there's two cases in Oklahoma that show that this is the police in Norman may be mistaken about this. And so he consulted with those attorneys from McAllister. Those are the ones that ended up representing us in the trials. and he started selling pipes again. And then I had left my day job, astronomics, a few months before that, and I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do. And one day he said, well, Stephen, I really appreciate all your help with the business, and I know you've been looking for a more permanent, full-time job, and that gives you the flexibility to be a council member. And, if you're interested, I really need someone to help me manage the store when I can't be there. And it's a locally owned small business in your district. Is that something you'd be interested in? And I was interested, and that's when I met with the city attorney at the time and was like, hey, this is what they sell. This is what the kind of the past here. Should I take this job? And the exact quote from the attorney was, I don't see a problem with it.
I don't see a problem with it.
So that's what
I've got those quotes too.
So that's what I took.
I don't see a problem with it.
But yeah, that's how I ended up working there, and I have now worked there for almost 10 years. 9 years since 2015. After we reopened and everything. So that's been something that a lot of people most know me for, is for fighting that case.
Saga.
Yes, and I never would have expected being a defendant in a criminal trial like that, or in any trial, but it was an experience I'll never forget.
Gangsta, straight gangster. Where you got to get a grill sometime,
right? And that
Stephen Holman,
and I think
with
that,
a grill.
Yeah, exactly. That experience too would have given me, I think, a lot of reason to have animosity towards the police department, to want to go after them, but I never did. I've approved every budget every year that I've been on council for them. I go to the police academy graduate, every one of them. I go to the award ceremony every year. I go to the memorial service every year. And there's been years where I've been the only elected official there.
Right, and that's what I'll say. I'll say that for you doing the job, you do the job. You're all in on it. I see you at anything that we had the opportunity to show up. Yeah. You were almost there. I don't know if you missed any of them. But you were the one that always there. I always knew Steve was going to be there. I tried, some things you just can't make it to. Yeah. But you were one that was you're always present. You're all in on this is what I'll say. But before we get out of here, we've been going for a little bit. Tell me, if you become mayor, what's your big plans for Norman, Oklahoma?
Well, try to make progress in addressing some of the big issues that we have. As a growing city, we've had a lot of growth. We've doubled in population since the 1980 census. So in my lifetime, Norman has doubled in size. So we've had all this growth, we've had progress, but now we have big city problems to deal with that are very expensive big city problems. We have issues with water security and safety. We have issues with housing affordability. I want to do everything I can from City Hall, working with the fellow council members to find ways, what can we agree on, what things can we work together on. Like you and I, we worked together on the Norman On Demand system, which is brought Sunday transit service and late night service to Norman for the first time ever. Finding what common ground do we have. What can we do to work together to address these issues? No one council member or one mayor can do everything by themselves. You're not going to be able to come up with a solution on your own. It takes everybody working together. And so addressing things like affordable housing, and which I think is how we can prevent people from becoming homeless. And as someone who was raised by a single dad in Norman, it's vitally important to me that Norman remains a place where a single parent could raise a kid, and that it's safe, that there's housing options that you can afford, that there's jobs, that the parks are good, that the trails, the schools are good. And so just above all, being a collaborative partner with people, showing up, letting people know, that the people of Norman know that I'm a mayor who cares about your issue, that's going to show up and support you if I can, that's going to work with everybody, regardless of where you live in Norman, what your political background is, what your religious background is, any of that. A mayor who works with people and tries their best to, it's unrealistic to say I'm going to represent every single person in Norman on every issue all the time, but I'm always going to listen, and I'm always going to try to find a way to make sure that your voice is heard, even if I don't always maybe vote the way you want in the end. I want you to know that it always matters. So that's what I want to really focus on as mayor, is bringing people together and trying to work on these big issues that we have as a community, because just going back and forth or infighting and things, we're not going to get anywhere. And those problems are just going to get bigger and even more expensive to deal with the longer that we're putting them off because we can't agree on anything.
What is the biggest roadblock in Norman? Things that you want to do. What is the biggest thing right now? If you said, here's one problem that if we have the solution for it, this is the one we're tackling. If I can only solve one issue,
it would definitely be housing and homelessness. Like there is no benefit to Norman by anybody being homeless in this town. The nonprofits and churches, religious organizations in Norman are stretched thin with donations, with volunteers. They've got less of those since 2020. They're doing a lot. They're doing everything they can. But there is no benefit to there being homelessness in Norman. I don't think anybody deserves that life. And the environment's so harsh here, not necessarily politically, but like the weather. It's really cold in the winter. It's really hot in the summer. And we have pretty severe weather in the spring and fall. So I have concern about people's well-being if they're choosing to live outside here, of all places. People talk about like LA and stuff. Well, it's 75 degrees in Los Angeles every single day all year round. You don't have to worry about freezing to death or dying of heat exhaustion there. And so that's the one thing that if I had a magic wand, I would love to be able to solve immediately. In Oklahoma, it rose by over 23% last year. In Oklahoma City, they saw a nearly 30% increase. We saw that nationwide, it's up 18% this past year to the highest level ever. So it's an issue that's affecting us as a nation. It's hitting small towns, big cities, and it's the one issue, and it's divisive politically. Nobody can seem to agree on what the right solution or solutions are, and it's something if there was like just a silver bullet magic wand, I wish we could solve that immediately. And so focusing on what can we do to make it less expensive to build housing in Norman? What can we do to make the process more streamlined and less difficult? Can we leverage federal funding to incentivize affordable housing or preservation of it, like, losing the OU motel? It's maybe unsightly, maybe there's criminal activity there that the police have to respond to, but the people that live there for a reason, and I don't know where else they would live if they couldn't live there. So being able to preserve that type of stuff instead of displacing people, and then they end up homeless, and then we're trying to break up their encampment here, so they go over here, and then we go break that one up, and it's just a constant cycle. The police, it's the same thing. They arrest somebody, they're in the county jail for 48 hours, they're right back out, and it's just a constant revolving door. So that's the one that is the most challenging to address, and one I would wish there was a quick and easy silver bullet to it.
All right. Before we get out of here, tell everybody where they can find you. If they want to look up, they want to donate, they want to find out more information about you, where should they go?
HolmanforNorman.com is my website. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Also, my personal cell phone is on the website, on our website. My city cell phone is on the city website. If you have city business you'd like to discuss with me, or if you have any questions. And I work the door at the deli on Campus Corner, the bar, usually on Friday or Saturday night. I always invite people, if you're out and about and you want to come hang out and talk to me at the door, I'm more than happy to. And people do often ask me city questions and what's being built over here, or what's this thing going on, and I'm really happy to do that. Same thing when I'm at Friendly Market. Usually every other Friday, we have a doctor that comes in. We help people get their medical cards and stuff, and I'm always more than happy to meet people there and talk about city stuff and answer questions. And then, yeah, I'm willing to meet with anybody anywhere in Norman, and I'll come to you, or we can wherever. And so those are the ways you can contact me. And my big kind of 3 pillars of what I stand for are accessibility, accountability, and transparency. So being there, being available, and being willing to talk with anybody anywhere, 2 things I really focus on.
Good deal. When is the election?
February 11th, 3 weeks from today, February 11th. And every vote really can make the difference in these local elections, and I encourage people to not take that for granted. And it takes just a few minutes. There's usually no line to vote in city elections, so don't let these decisions be made without you.
Sounds good. I absolutely appreciate you coming in here. I know that we don't agree on everything, but I told you I wouldn't beat up on you. I told you how I feel about you and what I actually think about you. And even though we disagree, it's a pretty good opinion of you. Like I said, we can disagree on things, but I see you as an authentic guy that is there for the right reasons. Even like I said, even though if I disagree with your logic on some things, you're there because you want to make a difference. It's not, you've done it. It hasn't been for self-service because you haven't got a whole lot out of it. You put a lot of misery into it, maybe, and dedication. I know what it takes, and you've done it, and you've done it out of love is what it seems to me, and I can appreciate that. Like I said, it doesn't matter whether I agree with you or not. I can respect your positions. So that's where I'm at with you, and I wish you the best luck, and I appreciate you coming in here today, brother. Well,
you're welcome. I appreciate the invite and opportunity, and I'm like I said, it's important to me that I walk the walk when I say I'm willing to meet with anybody and work with people to whatever we can do to make Norman better for everybody.
Well, authenticity goes a long way. I appreciate it. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
And best of luck to you in this election, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day.
You too.